What's up, guys? Welcome to another episode of For the Fowlers. I'm Brandon. Man, can't believe it. Here we are in December. This season sure is flying by, but really hoping that everyone who's able to get out is having some success out there. Love seeing the pictures once again. Keep sending those, keep sharing those. Love hearing the comments. Yeah, really happy to see the folks out that are able to get out and are having some success. So, well, for today's episode, really looking forward to this one. This one, we'll have a guest coming on here in a couple seconds, but really excited to be chatting with this person here, bringing on a fellow NorCal waterfowl podcaster straight out of the 707 in the Bay Area. Be sure to check their channel out on YouTube. If you don't already, make sure to check them out, subscribe to their channel. Great content over there. But excited to bring on the host of Fowl Mouth TV, Anthony Calhoun, aka Houn. What's up, Houn?
What's going on, man? Glad to be here.
Right on, man. I appreciate you jumping on. You know, it's been good connecting with you. You know, we've been on Instagram and texting a little bit. I know I caught up with you at the opener at Farmers, but yeah, how's everything going?
It's been slow. It's been slow. I've been good, but hunting's been real slow. We've had a good amount of challenges opening up the season for sure.
Yeah. Well, right on. We'll jump into how your season's going, but yeah, like I said, I wanted to have you on. I know we talked a little bit before we started recording here, but I wanted to have you on for the Fowlers because watching your content and your videos on Foul Mouth on YouTube, I noticed I'm like, this is a guy that I want to get to know. You and your crew seem to be very similar to mine and my crew, where we just want to go out and have a good time, enjoying the sport we love, getting out there, meeting people, obviously teaching people, bringing the kids along, mentoring some, maybe some new adult onset hunters, really the camaraderie. And like I said, just building that network. So seemed very similar. And I figured, hey, let's get to know each other a little bit on the podcast.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, definitely. There's a lot of similarities. I know there's a lot of things listening to your podcast. There's a lot of things that you're talking about that we've either talked about or we even, off of the podcast we've talked about too. So yeah, definitely.
Yeah, right on. Well, tell me a little bit about yourself. I know you said you're from 707 area in the Bay Area, but tell me a little about yourself. Did you grow up in the Bay, and how'd you get into hunting?
Yeah. Born and raised in Vallejo. Spent most of my childhood just fishing. I didn't get into hunting at all until I'd say maybe about 9 years ago. I got into turkey hunting, started with turkey hunting first and then deer hunting. My in-laws have some property back in the South, and so that kind of got my hunting career started. And then for waterfowl hunting, I believe I'm on my fifth season now, but I got a buddy, Logan, you'll see him he's my other co-host, and he bugged me for, man, it had to be 3 or 4 years to get into the sport. And, finally COVID came along and was sitting in the house bored, and that online hunter safety course came available and was able to get into that, and it was pretty easy. And yeah, just through Logan pushing me to get my hunter's license and get into it with him, I kind of just finally did it and jumped in head first, and man, haven't looked back, been hooked.
Yeah, I'm always curious what hooked you. I know you said you dipped your toe in a little bit with some turkey hunting and whatnot, but it's something about waterfowl hunting that just pulls us in. What was it for you?
Yeah, my greatest, I guess my best description is it's like fishing, but you can see the fish. You can actively see it. You're not dropping the line and hoping a fish swims by and grabs your bait. You can actually see them. You can interact with them. Kind of like turkey. Turkey was a huge thing where you can talk back and forth to the birds, and communicating with animals is something special. And when you do it right, it really gets your blood flowing for sure. So, my first experience duck hunting, we did opening day at Gray Lodge, and I believe it was the 21 season, the end of or 20 season. And that was when we had that crazy storm on opening day, and I think it rained probably about 6 inches on Gray Lodge that day. And went out there, and man, there were birds flying everywhere. And I only shot one duck that day, and it was a baby ringneck. But dude, I was ecstatic about it. I was hooked. And I'm like, man, this is what I've been missing the whole entire time. And that just that rolled into constantly looking and trying to find information on how to do this, how to set decoys, and it just became an addiction.
Oh, absolutely, man. And it's funny. I heard you tell that story on your channel, and it was funny to hear. Like, okay, so new hunter. I know it's opening day, so the birds are going to be out there. I get it. You'll get the local birds and whatnot. But I was like, man, he went to Gray Lodge his first hunt, and he came back. Good for him.
Yeah,
Sitting
yeah,
in that crazy storm. And I know, like, we as hunters, we like, that miserable weather. So we're used to it now. But like, I think that if I were to bring on someone and their first hunt, they're just sitting there just getting poured on, right? And
yeah,
I'm sure back then, I don't know about you, but for me, like when I started out, I didn't have my nice, Sitka Gore-Tex jacket. So, if I'm
yeah,
sitting in the storm,
yeah.
I'm getting cold, I'm getting wet, all that. But no, that's cool, man. You were talking about, kind of working with the birds, seeing them, watching them work and calling them in. And that's really what hooked me. It wasn't so much, hanging out at the refuge or hunting private property and getting all camoed out, walking through the field with my shotgun. It honestly, what hooked me was the first time I went out solo, right? And
Hmm.
you're hitting the call, hitting the whistle, everything that you're doing, you set up, you got your spread set up the way you do, and you're watching the birds work. And when they come in, it doesn't matter how they do it, but when they come in and you knock them down and you did it, that's all you. It wasn't like, oh, my buddy set up the spread or he said what decoys to bring. That's when I was like, oh,
Yeah,
I'm a hunter now, So I didn't look back, but
yeah, yeah, for sure. I did a few solo hunts my first year too. It was overwhelming, but
oh yeah,
I kind of went off of the little bit of knowledge that I had, and my attitude was I can't get better if I don't attempt.
yeah, that's impressive. I'd have to think about it, and I want to actually connect with the guy that got me into hunting. I'm trying to get him on the episode sooner than later, but yeah, God, I don't think it was my first season. Maybe at least my second or third, because it's a lot to go out by yourself. But it finally got to the point where I was like, I was so hooked, and it didn't matter if it was 70-degree day, bright blue skies. I wanted to go out, and you get all these kind of seasoned hunters. You're like, no, I'm good. It's November, blah blah. So I'm like, I got tired of just hearing no all the time. So I'm like, I'm gonna go by myself.
Yeah, yeah, and there's times where I knew it was slow, and I couldn't get anybody to come with me, and I went anyway.
Yeah.
And it was just me. For one, I just enjoy being out there.
Yep.
There's nothing more beautiful than watching the sunrise and the cold, crisp air and
Oh yeah.
watching the birds fly. I just enjoy it. It's peaceful,
Yeah.
and it really resets me, mentally.
Yeah, and it's fun to go out and hunt with your buddies and whatnot. But if you kind of think about it, it is easily kind of a solo sport at times too. Because it's one of those we're sitting quiet, keep your head down, that type of thing. Don't try not to make too much noise. But I'll tell you what, on those slow days, it is nice to have a buddy with you.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, definitely.
So, well, right on. Well, you talked about how you got hooked and everything, and I'm sure you mentioned you started reading about it and checking things out on Instagram. I'm sure you dove into YouTube, all that. But I think that's what's so great about your video or your video series is just it's another avenue for folks to kind of go on and kind of hear from other hunters in Northern California. We talked a little bit before we started. You're obviously pretty seasoned. Your buddy Logan's seasoned, but you got a couple guys in your crew that maybe have maybe half the time in that you guys do.
Yeah.
But you guys brought them along, and I think those kind of stories are pretty funny. How you got those guys started, but I do want to talk a little bit about your YouTube podcast and how that got started. You know, tell me how kind of Foul Mouth TV came to be.
You know, over the last really when we got it was our first year last year in getting a rice blind. So, we went through a lot of different, trials and tribulations, and there's a lot of things. There's a lot of hard lessons per se. And I started talking back and forth with guys, and I'm like, man, it'd be dope to just sit down and do a podcast. And we sit down after every single hunt and have a 30 or 40-minute conversation about what was going on and how we could have did this and why we didn't do this, and we should make this adjustment for whatever. We'd have, lengthy conversations. I'm like, man, we should just put this, record it
Mhm.
and put it out there to let people listen to it and listen to how our brains are working and how they should be working for those new hunters that are coming in, knowing what questions do you need to start asking and what do you need to start looking for. Because that was something that I didn't have, going, not growing up, but growing up in the duck game per se.
Yeah.
There were a few podcasts out there that would be talking. They would talk about their hunts, but they wouldn't break it down like that. So it's just, it was super secretive. I'm not a huge secretive person. If I have success, I'm gonna let the people who ask me know that I have success. I'm gonna give them the tips that helped me out. So that was something that really drove the channel into existence per se.
Yeah, it's funny. That's kind of the same reason why we started our podcast was, we were talking so much hunting, during the season, during the off season, my buddies and I, and we're like, why don't we just kind of record this and just, you guys say it. It's like, we're not trying to become like big influencers or whatnot, but it's like,
Yeah,
let's just record it. And if our buddies listen to it, cool. If some other people want to listen, fantastic. But what's funny is I was kind of laughing to myself when you were saying that, you guys would talk for like 30, 40 minutes after your hunt. And I don't know how your family, your spouses feel about it, but drives my wife nuts and my buddies' wives were there. They'll be like, weren't you just in a blind with them all day? Why are you guys on the phone now? Because like
yeah,
we'll talk that night and be like, we're literally breaking down that hunt and then
yeah,
planning our
yeah,
hunt for 7 days later. You know
yeah,
what I mean?
yeah.
So that's really what kind of kicked off the podcast is now we have kind of this dedicated time to, break it down. So,
Yeah,
um,
yeah, and that's something that also you can use it as a tool for yourself too, because you can go back, let's just say years down the road, you can come back and look at some of the stuff that you guys talked about and some of the things that you guys struggled with, or you know find some things that actually worked, and we're like, man, remember when we hunted this place on this podcast, we talked about using this and putting this in, this decoy configuration, blah blah blah, this and that, right?
yeah,
And it's more of like a audio journal per se
for sure.
of what you got going on. So
That's exactly it. I know you've talked about it. God, what is it? That North American waterfowler, right?
yeah,
That
yeah,
app, and you can keep the journal for like your harvest, your setup, how the wind was, what the weather, overall weather was, and really what you guys are doing, and then what my buddies and I are doing with our conversations and a little bit with this podcast is like that's exactly it. And a little audio journal.
yeah, yeah,
So. And if other people can learn from it or find it useful, fantastic.
yeah, yeah.
So, well, right on. So, obviously with Fowl Mouth TV, my podcast is more, audio only and whatnot, but you guys have the YouTube channel and have done a great job like filming your content and filming your podcast. But, was there a moment when you knew that it was going to be like more than just filming hunts? Like obviously you wanted to do kind of I don't want to say like in studio kind of conversations, but, as far as what you guys wanted the vision for the podcast to be.
Yeah, when me and Logan initially talked about it, it was more of kind of just like a rough draft. Basically, hey, let's shoot a couple hunts and then let's do some podcasts on top of it. And then, once we did the first podcast, then more ideas started coming out, and you kind of just roll into it, right? So, and it's like, hey, why don't we start doing hunts and then doing post hunt podcasts to go with the actual hunt video, whether, we were successful on the hunt or whether we weren't,
Yeah.
and just kind of talk about what we were seeing and stuff like that. So kind of just evolved kind of into that. And I'm pretty sure it'll evolve even more, and we'll start doing more things on top of that. But we're pretty set on podcasts and hunt videos to begin with. We put out more podcasts than I thought we would have so far, for
Right on.
sure.
Well, you mentioned Logan a couple times there, and I know we talked a little bit about your buddy Sean. Tell me a little bit about your crew there. Are they a bunch of guys you grew up with, or from the neighborhood, work? How's your hunting crew come together?
Yeah, so I'll start with Sean. Me and Sean played baseball together when we were teenagers, and
Cool.
then ended up playing baseball together in high school. And then after we graduated, didn't really run back into Sean until I'd say about 5 years after high school, and then we kind of just clicked, and we've been pretty tight ever since. And we got him. He's going into his second season this year. We got him hooked last year, and man, he's all into it.
Yeah,
So it's it's
yeah.
it's good to it's good to see.
And real quick about him, because I know you guys, I heard the story. That was him that you guys got him. He was a little boozed up, and you got him to commit to the rice blind, right? But
Yeah, yeah,
how did he get into hunting? Being it's only a couple years, was it through you guys or?
yeah. So it was through us. We had been bugging him. Once I got into it, I started bugging him on getting into it, and his fishing is his thing,
Okay.
and he's got a lot of money tied up in his fishing hobby, and he didn't want to put any money into another hobby, so had to go a little had to take a alternative route on getting him there. So we ended up buying his son a pair of waders for his birthday,
Oh, cool.
and then we took his son hunting to Gray Lodge, and his son was hooked. So that kind of put him in between a rock and a hard place, and kind of forced him to have to get in there. And then his first hunt. He just went straight into the blind. I actually, we had 5 people that wanted to hunt, and I ended up working a deal out where he split the fourth seat with the other person. So it kind of lessened the financial blow for him. And yeah, I caught him at the right time. Caught him when he had when he had a little too much, and he agreed to it. And man, he's been hooked ever since. So it's a you know looking back, I'm glad it happened. He does a lot of work when it comes to blind prep, decoys, and he's super active when it comes to the work that's involved with the rice blind.
Yeah, that's cool, man. That's kind of like with our group. Everyone has a role to play, right? And,
Yeah,
I don't want to say like some people do more, some people do less. Just everyone has a different job and everyone carries their weight, So
yeah.
that's cool. But what about what about Logan?
So yeah, Logan. I met Logan probably around the time I linked back up with Sean. Logan was friends with Sean's younger brother, so he was in the younger crowd. But Logan was always kind of ahead of his age bracket and
Sure.
maturity wise,
Sure.
right? So he just kind of linked with us. We called him when he started hanging around. We called him the prospect, right? Because he was a younger kid, and he had a good head on his shoulders, and he hung out with us for a while, and then all of a sudden he just became part of the group. And that's been almost been 15 years now.
So is he like I guess like the common denominator or foundation for like how you guys all got into waterfowl hunting? It all kind of started with him.
Oh yeah, for sure. If Logan didn't hunt,
Yeah.
we wouldn't be in it. I
Yeah.
would have never thought to get into the sport,
Sure.
because I wasn't around it when I was younger.
Yeah.
It's something that I didn't know.
Yeah.
I knew it existed, but I didn't know how and why and
Yeah.
how much fun it was. So he definitely started with me, and then that spilled over into. We got another buddy, Brandon. Haven't seen him on the channel yet, but we'll get him on there. Got him into it a year before Sean, and then we got another buddy, Danny, which he's taking a sabbatical this year per se, but
Sure.
we got him into it too. But it all started from Logan getting us into it. It went from me to Brandon to Sean to Danny. So yeah,
That
it's just slowly.
No, that's cool. I mean, you obviously see, the camaraderie or the relationships and on your channel, and you can tell you guys have been boys for a while, so that's cool. A good group of dudes. All right. Well, let's continue talking hunting. I know we kind of chatted a little bit about it, but overall, how's your season going so far?
And it's been slow, man. And it's been a struggle for sure. It's probably the most frustrating beginning to a season that I've had thus far. And so we made opening weekend at Gray Lodge. Ended up only shooting one bird there. Then I made the second weekend at Gray Lodge. And that was the video I posted on YouTube. And we walked out with 3 birds there. And then we hunted hunted a few times at our rice blind, but our rice blind it's not huntable really. We try to force it. So the biggest struggle there is when they harvested the rice. It was right after that storm
Hmm.
in late October. So the machines went through and completely tore the fields up.
Yeah.
So they couldn't get anything in there to disc the field for one, and then so now we're waiting on a stomper. So they ended up flooding the field, and we have throughout the field we probably have maybe 10 inches of stubble sticking up out the water. So it's really it's really you really can't hunt. We've hunted it a few times, and we've thrown some decoys in the ruts that the
Yeah.
machine has made, and just hunting like little pockets of
Sure.
water.
Yeah.
But it's been rough, man. And the stomper is in high demand now.
Yep.
That's the biggest thing is everybody. All these rice fields are in the same exact position, and they're all dependent on that stomper to come through and stomp those fields. So we had just this week we were supposed to get a stomper in, and the engine on the stomper blew, right?
Yep.
So that put us back another week. So now, I'm not looking forward to getting stomped until I want to say Monday of next week, Tuesday of next week. So it's really you know we're going to be deep into December before we have it available to us. So it's been a struggle, and we're just been sitting around kind of twiddling our thumbs, and
Yeah, that's tough, man, and unfortunately, you're not the only one who has had that experience this season.
yeah,
But what I've heard a lot about this season is just us needing to understand, and some folks need to re-understand that the farming comes first, right? So,
oh yeah, yeah,
and you seem to have the right attitude about it. But yeah, I mean, here we are in December, and it's still like that. That's a bummer, but hey, you know what? That's Mother Nature, and like you said, that stomper's in high demand. And God,
yeah.
I think it was John on Filthy Spoon that was saying like, man, what a business to get into this season. Just go buy a stomper and
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And
be
I understand.
make a pretty
I
penny.
am. Yeah, and like I said, I am frustrated with it, but I do. On the other hand, I understand that it has nothing. There's nothing that anybody can
Yep.
do to make this situation better, right? There's nothing that they could have done to avoid this, right? So, it's something that I've come to terms with. It's out of my hands. It's out of my club manager's hands. My poor club manager. He's panicking.
Yeah.
He's trying to uphold his end of the deal and make sure that he delivers his product, and he can't.
Yeah.
And it's out of his hands. So it's just the way it is.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when the rice isn't ready or not huntable, that leaves the refuge, right? And I don't want to, take anything you're maybe going to share on your channel, but you want to talk about today's hunt?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
which, by the way, hey, I really appreciate the invite too. It's a bummer I couldn't make it out today, but we'll get something
yep,
going this season. But yeah, I want to hear. I mean, hear about, or you told me about it, but I think it's kind of a funny
yeah,
story.
yeah. So I ended up getting a number 24 resi at YOLO. Now I've never stepped foot on YOLO in my 5 years of hunting, so I reached out to a few people for some advice. Yeah, so I reached out to a few people from the channel, and luckily I got some good information, at least tips, right? So showed up this morning, was sitting there at the booth, kind of looking at blind averages and trying to figure out what I wanted to do. I had a game plan. I was going to go free roam, but I heard this guy. This guy was at the
Well, hold on,
window,
do
and
you
he
want to
was
share that tip though, real quick? Because that's part
what?
of it. Well, you had to go out and buy.
Oh, yeah. So one of the tips that I got was coot decoys. Coot decoys were a big thing. So I ended up going out and getting a dozen coots, and I I understand the whole coot thing. I understand the confidence, but I would much rather buy some pintails or some mallards or widgeon, whatever.
Especially when you got to haul it out to the refuge. You're like, why am I a dozen coots in here? It's just, yeah.
So I ended up getting up on that, and I took the advice that was given. I'm not going to be an asshole, right? I'm gonna do, if you say this works, I'm gonna give it a shot, right? So, was at the window, and I heard this guy. He was asking one of the guys at the check station, for tips, and he's telling him, the birds are on the close zone. You're gonna need this, you're gonna need that, and oh, by the way, I'd recommend you have coot decoys. All right, so this guy, hey, hell, I don't have no damn coot decoys. Let me go see if I can find some. So this guy is walking around to multiple people, just random people. Hey, you got coot decoys? Let me buy them off of you. Let me rent them off of you. And they're just like, nah, bro, I got my own hunt to worry about. So, I'm kind of just standing there, and this guy walks up and he's like, hey, man, you're a Houn, right? And I'm like, yeah. And he goes, oh, my name is John, Duck Chugger. And I was like, oh, right. So, shook his hand, and Duck Chugger has been a good supporter of my channel. So he always
Same.
reaches out and comments on the videos and stuff that I put out, but I just never seen his face before, right? So it was good to put a face to his name. So then he introduces the guy that was asking for the coot decoys. His name is Sid, right? So I'm like, oh, you're Sid. You're the one that John's always talking about, right? So it was a funny, it was a real funny moment, because as soon as he introduced himself as Sid, all those stories from John kind of like popped into my head, and man, he fits it to a T, dude. Like it's, you can't, whatever John is saying, it's a little over exaggeration, but man, it's spot on, man. So me and him started talking. He was trying to buy the coot decoys off of me, and I ended up just throwing the offer out. Hey, man, I asked him what resi number he had, and he said he had number one. So I was like, hey, man, if you let me hunt on your resi with you, I'll bring my coot decoys out there. And I go, I got a blade too. He looked at John, and John shrugged his shoulders, and he said, all right, well, you can roll with this. So I ended up getting up and hooking up with them. Notice my AirPod fell out. Ended up hooking up with them, and ended up hunting today out of the same blind with him. So
Yeah, that's cool. And you said two good dudes and everything, which is awesome. So, yeah, I actually put my notes here. I wanted to ask, being that it was the opener for spinning wing season and everything, and I know one of your guys' videos was about that blade that you guys got at the CWA dinner. What were your thoughts on it?
I like the reaction that I got from the birds.
Okay.
Now there is going to be a learning curve for me on placement.
Okay.
Because they come in to a certain extent, and then they flare off. So there's going to be some times where I'm going to play a lot with placement of the blade, whether it's placing it, 40 yards away from me, so that when they do come down and, kind of cupped up and go towards that blade, before they flare, they're within range of me. They're just different. It's just different things I have to play with. I need to play with shutting it off once they lock in.
So I was going to ask, I know there's different models and whatnot, but it comes with like remote. You can turn it off and on and all that. That's cool.
Correct.
Cool.
So we started off with two blades. We started off with the wind blade and then the electronic blade. Ended up pulling the wind blade because it was just making too much noise, and then just rolled with the electronic blade. And like I said, we got a few birds to come in directly to it. For the most part, it would pull them out of the sky. You can see them just start coming down, and then they would work and kind of come in a little bit, and then they would flare off. So it's just, I'm gonna have to work with placement, and it's gonna be a huge learning curve for me with that. But it does, I was pretty impressed with how well it pulled them out of the sky for sure.
Yeah, no, that's cool. And, it sounds like a future episode of Fowl Mouth, once you guys figure that all out. But, it's funny, man, that mastering kind of the spinning wing or the blade and, when to use it, where to put it, it's definitely an art, man. And kind of like a science, because I'll tell you what, man, there's sometimes where, you think like, man, that thing's flaring everything within, 500 yards of it, right? And then there's sometimes where that thing's just spinning and birds are diving right in it like kamikazes, so it's like, does the motion, because sometimes people are like, they swear by the remotes and all that. So yeah, it's an art,
Yeah. And the thing is, I've been really pumped about using the blade, right? Because everybody raves about it. They
Yeah.
rave and they rave about it. But me personally, I haven't seen it work like they say it works, right?
Yeah.
So I think there's a learning curve on where, placement, when to shut it off, when to turn it on,
Yeah.
so hopefully this season I can get that locked in.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, at the end of the day, it's just like a big flasher out there, because sometimes I think like, we spend all this money on, the robo ducks, the mojos, the lucky ducks, whatever. We got the duck body and the wings flapping out. But then you put basically this field goal post out there with a big blade in it. Same thing goes back to when Wind Whacker came out. I'm like,
Yeah.
what the hell? These things are just big ass wind chimes sometimes,
Yeah.
But I'll tell you what, sometimes in the right wind, when those things are spinning, like I said, kamikazes, man, or I'll get like teal diving in on. I've had some hunts where literally like the pintail are just hovering over it, and all it is a ski pole with a couple blades on it, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, just to kind of get the attention. But and I'll tell you what, there's no remote on that, and it seems to work, So
And we got a couple of those, and we use those at our rice blind, and there's days where you get those teal bombing in, and there's days where they don't want nothing to do with it. You gotta end up pulling them.
Yep, for sure. For sure. So, well, I know you're out at YOLO today. When it comes to the refuges and whatnot, do you kind of primarily hunt like the Sacramento area? Do you get down in like Grizzly and Sassoon? Do you grasslands at all? Where do you like to go?
I have not been to the grasslands. It's something that's a place where I want to go. My number one bird that I'm after is a cinnamon teal. So I know they got plenty of them down there. So that's somewhere where I want to hit that soon. But primarily, we hit Colusa a lot last year. I still, as hard as Gray Lodge is, I still love hitting Gray Lodge, and then Delavan, and then I haven't hunted Sac for probably about 3 or 4 years, but mainly Colusa, Delavan, Gray Lodge are my three go-tos.
So, it's funny you mentioned Colusa, and I was thinking about this earlier. Obviously, there's some down in the grasslands I haven't been to, but I've been to quite a few down there. But as far as like the Sacramento Valley goes, even Grizzly Island, YOLO, I've been to every single refuge. I've never hunted Colusa. Never. Put in for it for years. I put in for the lotto, just never got it. And this is back when you can put in for all the different refuges. We used, I was living in the Bay Area at the time, and, driving up from the East Bay, we would hit Colusa first, and then we would kind of make our way through and go all the way to finish up at LDC and then work our way back to Colusa. And I always ended up having a better lotto number somewhere else. So I have never hunted Colusa. So, I've heard good things about it for sure, but hunted Sutter a bunch of times, hunted Sac, hunted Delavan, but just never Colusa. So
I got into Colusa last year, and we got into some good hunting there.
Oh yeah,
kind of hooked on that refuge now. So
yeah, just never like the opportunity. I'm sure I can go drive over this weekend and sweat on and go on and do an afternoon or whatnot, but I've never done it. So you mentioned some of those places that you frequent. What's your favorite refuge? And maybe how come? Maybe why?
I think I'm going to have to stick with Colusa.
Okay.
Colusa's got to be my favorite. And, what really stuck out to me is, last year, me and Sean ended up getting on right before 3:00. And we found a spot, in free roam that, man, the birds were just coming in straight at our face. And so we ended up finishing that night, and then ended up lottoing for the following night, and ended up going back to the same spot and ended up limiting it out. And that was my first limit ever since I started. And then it was also Sean's first limit, which was crazy because last year was his first year. So here we got a first year hunter. He's got a blind his first year, and he limits out his first year all duck hunting, right? So that was a pretty special, cool thing to be a part of. So that'll always hold its rank, in my eyes.
What about your least favorite?
My least favorite would be Grizzly Island.
Okay. How come?
The times that I've hunted, it's a weird terrain per se. It's all pickleweed. There's not a lot of stuff to hide in, and it's chaos. It's
Yeah.
it's you know it. If you look at Gray Lodge, it's organized chaos,
Yeah.
but Grizzly is just
Yeah.
straight chaos. And I could be a little biased on it because I don't know it as well. I probably hunted it under 10 times, probably about eight or nine times, and it's never produced for me. And there's always been, it's not the cart paths aren't kept up. You're struggling through that, and it's not my favorite.
Yeah, that's a good point, man, because honestly, I'm kind of with you on that where if I had to think about my least favorite, you mentioned them, Gray Lodge and Grizzly, and they're similar. And you are right about Gray Lodge being organized chaos. It is still chaos, but for me, I think a lot of it is just, and we're not old, but just getting older, where I'm like, I'm not looking to race these 20-year-old kids out to a spot, or even once I get set up, I'm not looking to have a headlight war out there. Like, it's just not what I'm into. But you mentioned it where I also haven't hunted those places as often as some of the other refuges up in like the Sac Valley or the grasslands. So
Hmm.
to your point where it's like, hey, maybe if I knew Grizzly or Gray Lodge like the back of my hand, it's my spot. You know what I mean? Like there's some people that absolutely love those places,
Yeah, there's
but
people that swear by Grizzly Island.
exactly, right? But and it's funny because like I said, I grew up in the East Bay. I'm from Pleasanton originally, and Grizzly's super close. The closest
Yeah, yeah,
refuge, but still, I
yeah,
I just drove right past it.
yeah,
I chose to go another hour and a half up to Delavan or whatever,
yeah.
and I know those are considered better refuges anyways, but yeah, it just wasn't for me. So no, that's interesting for sure, but. I do want to circle back real quick, kind of talking about the filming. And I know I talked to you a little bit, before we started recording about how, I used to film some hunts with the GoPro and, just kind of trying to capture those because, obviously we do such a good job, kind of enjoying the moment, but you kind of want to be able to relive it. And I can't tell you how many times, especially now since I've started this, podcast and, started a whole new Instagram where it's like, damn, I didn't take a picture of those birds before, I processed them or
Yeah.
before I left with the buddies. And, you know, content creation just it's tough, because we're so pumped and it's just one more thing to set up, when you're out
Yeah.
hunting. But I guess my question for you is like how'd you get into kind of like filming and why film and publish the hunts instead of just kind of keeping them like low key and just enjoying them with your buddies?
Yeah. Yeah. So I got into, somewhat filming. I wouldn't say I'm a photographer, but I got into the whole film thing when me and my wife went on our honeymoon. I filmed everything and got into Final Cut Pro. That's the editing software. And I kind of, did a montage of our honeymoon. Spent a lot of time in it, learned a lot about Final Cut Pro, and just kind of liked the art part of it. And then I kind of just spilled in the hunting. The setup that I run is so easy. That I won't miss any of the action. I have a camera that kind of pre-records, and then after the action happens, I can just hit the record button, and it'll have up to 2 or 3 minutes before I'll
Oh,
even hit the
nice.
record
Okay.
button. So I'm able to, enjoy that moment and celebrate and do, whatever it is, and be like, oh, let me hit the record button, right, and
Yeah.
capture all of that, right. So it's made it pretty easy, and I've kind of figured out how to get around not having to change batteries out
Sure.
constantly, because that was when I started filming some of the hunts last year, I was changing batteries every hour, and excuse me, and you're so worried about what's flying around. You're trying to change batteries out, and then you end up missing opportunities. So this year I kind of got it dialed down. I run an external battery pack
Smart.
to
Yeah.
my camera, so I don't even have to mess with it. And so the big the fun part is keeping all that, having everything constantly being filmed. and then I can sit there and select on what I want to capture. And then it's just, kind of going through, watching it, kind of put it into a timeline and capture everything, capture all the funny stuff, capture all the videos, the bloopers, whatever it may be, and just compile it into one video.
Yeah, no, I've really enjoyed your hunt videos. Like, I know you've obviously put a few out there, and no, I think they're pretty cool for sure. But I wasn't. You mentioned like the batteries and stuff, dude. It was so hard, and I know cameras are way better now. But like I said, I was out there years ago with my GoPro, and I had set up like a little tripod behind the blind there, like a little like foot long legs, and I'd be back there. I'd carry like 6 different batteries with me,
Yeah,
and then
yeah,
that's cool what you were talking about with the kind of pre-record, because I used to wear like the little, it'd be up here on my hat,
yeah,
and I
yeah,
wouldn't want to run it the whole time. So I had to sit up there, doop, hit it, but then I'd take
yeah,
it off and be like, is this thing on? Okay, the red light's on. All right, let me put it back on.
yeah.
So no, that's cool for sure. Yeah, I mean, I was going to ask what's the hardest part about filming it, but you kind of answered that, capturing the
Yeah,
content, but
the hardest thing about filming is when you're the only one filming and you're with a group, you feel like you're kind of dragging them back because they're ready to go and you're like, hold on, I got to get set up,
yeah,
or let's not start this so I can kind of capture some of the stuff. I don't want to say okay action, but I want all the the jokes and stuff to start once I get everybody mic'd up, or whatever, as I start rolling. That's the only challenge is being that guy. Hey, let's take a picture. Or let's film this. Let's do this, and people are kind of like waiting on me to get started.
yeah. I think, God, I don't remember who it was, but it was a pretty big like waterfowl TV show type thing, and they were basically saying like, "Hey, we're showing all these great hunts, but I'll tell you what, like when you guys come out and hunt with us, like it's more of a production than it is a hunt. You know what I mean? Like we're waiting for the flight, we're waiting for the right lighting, all these different things. And I know that's not what you're up to, but still, to your point,
Yeah,
you're trying to not only capture the hunt, but you're probably also thinking about foul mouth too.
yeah,
And you're
yeah.
like, hey, so like there's a little bit of that little added stress or whatnot. Because you and I talked about it where it's like this season, it's more than just me going out, getting my birds, cleaning up the spot, and getting off the refuge or getting out of the blind. Now it's like, okay, I got
Yeah.
to make sure, did I capture enough for Instagram? Did I, was it a good enough hunt or a good enough experience? Did I check in with someone at the check station to maybe talk about on the podcast or something? So it's a whole,
Yeah,
it,
yeah,
it adds a whole nother element to it for sure.
yeah. And I try to be very minimal with it, and I try to be very quick with my setup. Like if we're gonna hunt, I'll have kind of stuff pre-set up,
Sure.
so I don't, I'm not that guy that's slowing people
No.
down or whatever. And with the pre-record option, man, it comes in clutch, dude, because just conversations and whatever it is, it's already captured. You gotta hit the record button.
Well, I'll tell you what, whether it's Sean or anyone else, they start knocking down those limits like they're doing. They're going to love that you have that filmed and that captured.
Oh,
So, you
oh
know,
yeah, for sure. Yeah, even Sean said he really liked the video that I put out when we were at Gray Lodge, and I mean that was only a 3 bird day, and
yeah,
I caught a lot of jokes in there and just us being stupid and talking shit to each other.
yeah, yeah. No, I saw that one that was a good video for sure. Cool, man. Well, let's talk a little bit about, and this kind of both kind of the premise for our podcast is building that sense of community, that waterfowl culture. And, we kind of talked a little bit about content building and whatnot, but let's talk a little bit specifically to NorCal, like, why that matters, why building NorCal waterfowl content matters. And I guess for me, and maybe you can kind of build off it, is like, we as hunters, especially here in California, like we're definitely the minority, right? So, if we can kind of put the sport in a good light, supporting each other, your video content showing like, obviously not just the hunt, the harvest, but, talking about it and, it's a learning experience. It's a way to bond with maybe your kids, that type of thing. But talk a little bit about
Yeah,
that.
yeah. I mean, you kind of hit the nail right on the head. It's just that if you look at whether it's political climate or animal rights activist groups and stuff like that, hunting is is a sport that's under fire constantly, and this is something that we have to fight for. I mean, it's something I'm passionate about. It's something that every other duck hunter or big game hunter or turkey hunter, whatever pheasant hunter, whatever it is, they're passionate about it, and we have to continue to fight. Fight for it, because any day and every day that this sport is under attack by lobbyists and whoever else doesn't agree with the sport. Without people like us battling for it, you got all the organizations, the CWA, Ducks Unlimited, Delta Waterfowl. You got all these organizations fighting for it. We have to join in that fight too. We can't sit back and let these organizations do the fighting for us. So it's just something I'm passionate about, and something I want people to be able to look at our channel and see how passionate we are about the sport, and hopefully gain that same passion, or even want to be interested in joining the sport. So us as Northern California, we're a special group. We have a ton of refuges, a ton of public land that we can access, public waterways. You have the Delta, right? You got that. You got the Susu Marsh. I mean, you got all the public land up north. We have a very special place that's if you look at just California in general, you look how beautiful the state is. Look at what we have available for us to hunt. You go to Texas, they don't have public land like we do, right? So it's something that's special, and something that really needs to be respected and fought for.
Yeah, 100%, man. God, I just saw it the other day, and it was on Instagram, and I think it was like top 10, top 15 states for waterfowl hunting, and California was right there at number 3. I think only behind Arkansas and Louisiana, right? And we all know that just our hunting rights or privileges, however you want to look at it, are being attacked every single day, and that's why it's so important that, I love all these different podcasts that have been out, whether it's, Filthy Spoon, the conversations I've had, watching your channel, all these other California-based ones, and even just some of the folks I've connected with on Instagram since starting this. It's a good community out there, and the positive far outweighs the negative when it comes to like the folks that are, taking it, putting the sport in a bad light, right?
Correct.
And then I'll throw it back at you where you said, I hit the nail on the head. You did too when you mentioned those organizations, California Waterfowl, Ducks Unlimited. And I think it was one of your first or second episodes. And this was spot on. What you guys said was like, they're basically like the union for us hunters. You know what I mean? So, protect our rights, obviously to access to, doing things with, the limits when it comes to waterfowl, our firearm rights, things like that. Because, you mentioned the animal rights and everything. Like, really, I think the reason why, especially here in California, it has to do with the fact that we use firearms, Yeah. So, that's why it's, like I said, just the community support each other, that type of thing.
Yeah, and to touch on the community too, since starting my channel, I've met more people than I have in the last 5 years.
The same
now, right? And, I bumped into John from the Filthy Spoon last year before I even started the channel, and kind of just kept in touch with him. And we had a good time at Farmers last year, and kind of just kind of hit it off and kept in touch. And then, man, once I did the podcast on his platform, it just it shot me into a different category, with me meeting different people and people noticing me, and
agreed.
It drove a lot of traffic to the channel. And now, when I go on the Farmers, I see a couple people that I didn't know last year, right?
Yeah.
And able to kind of link up with them and chat with them, and it's always a good thing to kind of to start getting to know people.
Well, and I'm like you, like I like meeting people, especially when we're out like at these refuges, or heck, just walking through, I don't care, sportsmen's kittles, whatever, farmers.
Yeah.
And and once again, hit the nail on the head, is John said it, where he's like, these refuges, the check station is like the prison yards, everyone's all like flexed up, staring at each other, that type of thing. And you know what, like, I've had some great conversations out there, once kind of been like, hey, I have this podcast, or, just kind of people
Yeah.
realize like, okay, cool. Like, they open up a little bit more. So no, it's been cool. Well, hey man, well, that's all I had here. Dude, I can't thank you enough for coming on, coming on the podcast. And, I hope that we can get a hunt together. I really appreciate the invite for today. I'm like,
Yep.
once again, I'm bummed it didn't work out, but yeah, guys, make sure that you check out Houn and the rest of their crew on Fowl Mouth TV on YouTube. And then your
Yep.
Instagram is Fowl Mouth TV as well, right? Or did I get that right?
Yep. Yeah. Fowl.mouth.tv.
There you go. So check them out on Instagram. If you don't follow them already, give them a follow. Some good stuff over there. And yeah, make sure you're following For the Fowlers on Instagram as well. And continue to rate and review us on Apple, Spotify, and wherever else you're listening to this podcast. So, Houn, thank you again, man. It's good chatting with you. Have a great rest of the season. Happy holidays. And we'll chat with you all soon.